I bring all this up because it really frames Scream and helps you understand why it was such a massive cultural explosion, right? I mean, it changed everything. You had parodies in commercials and the MTV Movie Awards and even the Oscars of, what's your favorite scary movie, right? Like that was just, it was in the zeitgeist, it was in the culture, it was everywhere because it came out and said, hey, horror sucks now. It's so predictable. It's so sexist. It's so stupid.
Yeah.
But we're going to do it good.
In both of these films deal with like the commodification of violence and like what are you watching? You can't turn away.
Welcome to Drive-In Dive-In. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Luke.
And this is a movie podcast.
We really try to dig into the movies that we discuss and spoil basically everything as a result, so really recommend watching the movies before listening.
And it's called Drive-In Dive-In because we pick two movies like you'd get at a drive-in that are thematic or related in some way that we find interesting.
Ultimately, we're hoping to share our love of the cinema with you, and if we can challenge you to look at these movies from a new angle, all the better.
You can find us wherever you listen to your podcasts and on social media at Drive-In Dive-In.
Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you come back.
The drive-in.
Dive in and swim.
The drive-in is closed.
Just dive in head first.
Especially at the drive-in.
그럼 바로 시작하는 거네.
It's like a drive-in.
So let's just dive right in, okay?
Welcome to another episode of Drive-In Dive-In. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Luke.
And we're here to talk movies. This is our first episode where we're doing a thematic comparison, which I'm pretty excited about. The movies are 1996's Scream and 1996's Thesis, or Tesis in its original Spanish. All right, and a quick note from the editor's chair as I'm putting this together. We lost about 6 minutes of Luke's footage when his computer crashed during the initial intro, so I've taken some of my comments from that time that help flesh out what we're talking about and inserted them. So if it feels a little choppy, that's why. And then this was filmed in mid-January of 2026. So before Scream 7 came out, after the initial firings and controversy. So if you're listening and wondering why we're not talking about Scream 7 or any of the controversy around it, it's not really relevant to the conversation that we're having in analyzing Scream and Thesis and their relationship to each other and the culture at the time. But, just so we're clear, free Palestine. All right, back to the episode. Throwing out the warning once again, if you have not seen these movies, stop now. You're like, why would you tell me to stop listening to your podcast? Because I don't want you to do yourself a disservice and spoil these movies.
But we do need to talk about some of these contexts.
And now for a quick plot summary of these, though I want to once again really, really, really emphasize that if you haven't seen these, please watch these before listening to this podcast. And that's how much I care about you not spoiling these incredible films for yourself. If you have any inclination that maybe you would watch it if this podcast convinces you that they're good enough to watch, consider this. I'm fast forwarding in time and telling you that you're going to be convinced and you should just pause this and go watch them and then come back. For those that just cannot handle horror but still want to listen, or are never intending to watch these movies but still want to hear us talk about them, cool, let's jump into the plot. I'll start with Scream because I've got that pretty well memorized, and then we'll do Thesis. So Scream takes place in a town called Westboro. It's an idyllic California, I don't know if you call it a suburb, but town, I suppose, in wine country. And we open on Drew Barrymore playing Casey Becker in her home, popping some popcorn, getting ready to watch a scary movie, home by herself when she gets a phone call from a creepy voice that's a little seductive. And it asks her some fun questions, or at least seems a little fun at the beginning, like, what's your favorite scary movie? And they flirt a little bit back and forth talking about scary movies before the caller drops the ever creepy line, I want to know who I'm looking at, which of course causes Casey to freak out, lock all of her doors, spiral. The caller keeps calling them. Every ring of the phone is just a new scare for her and a heightening of the tension. And then she's forced to play a trivia game with the killers, answering horror questions. And if she gets any wrong, they're going to kill her boyfriend, Steve, which they do by disemboweling him on her pool deck as she watches from inside. Then she gets another question wrong. And now it's her turn to die. So Ghostface chases her down and stabs her in the heart and then strings her up in a tree outside of her house. And just as her parents are coming home and they see her dead. So we meet our main five at the school. You've got Sydney Prescott, who is played by Neve Campbell. She's our lead. Her boyfriend, Billy Loomis, his best friend, Stu Mocker. Sydney's best friend, Tatum, whose brother is Dewey, the deputy sheriff, and the fifth wheel of the friend group, Randy. They're all talking about the murders, and the guys are being a bit callous, especially because, as we find out, Sydney's mom was raped and murdered a year prior, almost to the day, and the supposed killer, Cotton Weary, is in jail, and the story had kind of become national news and made one of the local reporters, Gail Weathers, famous after she wrote a book about it. Well, Gail Weathers is back in town to cover the new murder, and she and Sydney have a confrontation, and then the police, Dewey and the rest of the police, start investigating the murders. We also find out, that day, Sydney's dad is leaving for a business trip that he can't get out of. That night, Ghostface shows up at her house and tries to kill her, but fails. And very shortly thereafter, Billy shows up, very conveniently. And when a cell phone drops out of his pocket, Sydney gets real suspicious. The police arrest Billy as a suspect. Billy and Sydney's father kind of wind up being two of the main suspects at the time. There's some suspicion thrown on Randy as well because he's super into horror movies and things like that. But it's a big kind of whodunit, and I'm going to stay light on plot. Even though I'm going to spoil the ending and some other key things, it's still such a great movie. I don't want to spoil absolutely everything here, and I still really, really encourage you to go and watch it. But yeah, so there's a curfew that is kind of put out for the town to try and keep all the kids safe, but they are having all of the kids over, or all the high schoolers over to their house to have a party despite the curfew, because if we're all together, then we'll be safe, kind of thing. Gail finds out and follows them and gets a hidden camera in the party that she's going to be using. And, I think she's kind of secretly hoping that Ghostface is going to show up and cause carnage and get her even more famous. But either way, she thinks it's going to be good footage for her report. Dewey is also on his way there because he's investigating the murders and, kind of wants to make sure that everybody at the party is going to be safe when he finds out about it. Billy shows up and he and Sydney reconcile, and he convinces her to sleep with him. According to the very famous monologue by Randy that's happening at a similar point in time in the movie, that is one of the rules of horror, that if you break it, you die. So now Sydney has broken one of the cardinal rules and is in danger, and guess what? Oh, Ghostface shows up and stabs Billy. Also happening at the party, I think a bit before that, Tatum went to the garage to get a drink and gets killed by Ghostface using the garage door. Kid comes into the party, says that the principal has been murdered and strung up on the football field, so the party empties out with people rushing off to go and see his dead body because these kids are super morbid. And Gail and Dewey get kind of run off the road by some of these kids, but that leads them to see Sydney's dad's car hidden in the woods, and they realize that he didn't go on his work trip and is either still here and killing people, or is in danger, or is dead. They rush back to the party. Ghostface almost kills Randy, who stayed behind because he's drunk and he's watching Halloween and he'd rather just watch Jamie Lee Curtis, but gets distracted, and then Ghostface instead kills the driver of Gail's news van. Big confrontation that culminates at the house. It seems that Ghostface kills Dewey and Randy. And then Billy shows back up, despite having been stabbed, and Ghostface is unmasked to be Billy and Stu working together. Essentially, they're like, we're going to go down in infamy and we will have been stabbed and we're blaming it all on your dad. We've been keeping him in the closet here, like tied up, and we're going to kill him and say that he did it all and he stabbed us. Yeah, long story short, there's a big confrontation, and Sydney and Gail manage to kill Billy and Stu. Stu gets a TV dropped on his head, and Sydney puts a bullet through Billy's brain. And that is more or less the end of the movie. And the first of a franchise, because it was so fucking good. Now, as for Thesis, a bit more straightforward, despite still being a bit of a whodunit. We open up meeting Angela, who is a university student in Madrid, going to, I think, film school, or maybe she's going to be a writer, but she's writing her thesis on audiovisual violence and how it impacts the family and society. And when she's first on her way to school that morning, the commuter train she's on hits someone who committed suicide by jumping in front of the train, and as she's leaving, she's like really trying to look like she's really kind of hypnotized and drawn to seeing this carnage, but kind of like backs out at the last minute as we cut away. And then she is talking with her professor, Professor Figueroa, to ask for him to help her find films that she can reference in her thesis. And he kind of discourages her from the thesis, but she's very adamant that like this is very important and it needs to be done. So he's like, yeah, okay, fine. So she goes and talks to Kemma, because he's known for collecting violent films and pornography, and she goes to Kemma's place with him that evening after school, and it's fucking dirty and filled with horror memorabilia, and he's kind of showing her like Cannibal Holocaust and other movies. While that's going on, Professor Figueroa is going into the school's film archives and goes into this almost hidden area and finds some unlabeled videotapes and grabs one and brings it to the screening room at the school to watch. And the next day she goes into the screening room, and I guess nobody else had gone in there yet. She finds Professor Figueroa dead, having died while watching the tape. Obviously there's an investigation, but she steals the tape. She takes the tape from the crime scene before calling and reporting his death. A younger Professor Castro takes over Figueroa's classes and the supervision of Angela's thesis. At Kemma's house, Angela brings the stolen tape and they put it in, and they realize it's a snuff film. And she stops it, and then later on, to kind of be brave, she watches it with the contrast all the way down, so it's a black screen, and she's just listening to it. And over the course of the movie, eventually she and Kemma watch it, and Kemma ends up studying it and figuring out a bunch of things, including that he recognizes the victim as a student from their school named Vanessa, who had gone missing 2 years ago. And he also noticed that the person making the video used a camera with digital zoom, which there were only like 3 cameras at the time that had that. It was very new technology. And one of them is a camera that is able to be checked out at the school. So they start looking for that camera. And while doing that, she sees this handsome dude named Bosco using that camera on campus. So he notices that she's watching him, and he kind of like catches up with her, and they're talking, and he notices that she's got some newspaper clippings about Vanessa's disappearance, and he's like, oh, I have information about that case. And she's like, oh, cool, I'm doing a report about the disappearance. Can I interview you on camera? So they're kind of, she's playing him and suspects that he's the killer. But during the interview, he convinces her that he's innocent, and he just really charms her. So she's kind of like, no, it couldn't be Bosco. But Kemma is like, no, Bosco's a psychopath. Like, it was probably him. Then she comes home and Bosco's there, and she's like, what the fuck? But he charms her family and her, and like, well, not so much her, but he's already charmed her family and is invited to stay for dinner. And then he tries to seduce her, but she resists his advances. At school, Kema asks the security guard to see the security tape of the video library on the night of Figueroa's death to see what happened. And that night, Angela has a dream that Bosco threatens her with a knife, then goes down on her and then stabs her, all while recording her on video. But it was just a dream. The next day, Castro questions Angela about Figueroa's death and shows her the security footage of her discovering the body and taking the videotape, and is like, hey, I'm going to go to the cops. And she's about to admit why she took it when Kema calls her and tells her to leave Castro's office immediately, saying he's involved in the whole thing. Castro tries to grab her, but she flees, and Bosco's girlfriend confronts Angela. She explains that she, Vanessa, Bosco, and Kema were all kind of in this understudy program with Castro 2 years ago. Bosco's girlfriend says that she left when they made Vanessa take off her clothes for a short film because she felt uncomfortable, and that she's always found Kema to be skeevy and that he was obsessed with the idea of snuff films, and so she thinks that Kema killed Vanessa. Angela confronts Kema, and he admits that he knew Bosco, but claims that he also left the group once things started getting out of hand, whatever that means. Kema brings Angela to the hidden tunnel, which is where all of the videotapes were that this one of Vanessa's murder had been taken from. We see that there's lots of others, indicating that there have potentially been lots of murders filmed and snuff videos made. While they're in there, the door closes and they're locked inside. They kind of run and they only have matches to light their way. And eventually they find an editing room deep in these tunnels and they kind of fall asleep in there. Angela wakes up alone, and she tries to leave and is grabbed and chloroformed. When she wakes up, she's tied to a chair. Castro's there videotaping her, and he explains that he only ever edited the videos. He never killed anyone, but that he has to kill her, and he promises it'll be quick. He takes out a gun, aims it at her head, and then he's tackled by Kema, who had been hiding. They wrestle with the gun, and it goes off and kills Castro. Angela and Kema escape, and then when they get back to Angela's house, her father tells her that her sister went to a party with Bosco. So Angela runs off to the party to save her sister, but when she gets there, her sister doesn't want to leave with her and isn't listening to her and insists that Bosco is in love with her. And then so like, in order to convince her sister to leave with her, she goes over to Bosco and makes out with him and is like, see, he doesn't love you, let's go. Then the next day, Angela's like, look, we've got enough, like, we need to go to the police, like, we're not investigators, right? Like, let's do this the right way. And eventually Kema agrees, but he's like, oh, I need to take a shower first. And while he's in there, Angela finds the same camera type, the same type of camera that Bosco had, the one that they've been looking for, in Kema's belongings, and inside is a tape of Angela taken from outside her bedroom window. So she realizes that Bosco's been stalking her, and she dips. She's just out of there. She goes back home, tells her sister that she needs to stay safe and stay away from other people, and jumps in a taxi and goes to Bosco's house. While all that's happening, she's being followed by a figure in a black raincoat that we don't see. Then at Bosco's house, he and Angela talk about their relationship, and the lights go out. Bosco goes to check on the power and doesn't come back. When Angela goes to check on him, he's lying on the floor, seemingly unconscious. Kema had followed her, and he knocked out Bosco. Bosco comes to and tackles Kema, and a struggle ensues, and Bosco is beating Kema, and while Bosco is going to grab rope to tie Kema up, Kema tells Angela to go look in Bosco's garage. Angela goes out to the garage and recognizes that it's the room where the snuff film was recorded. Bosco ties up Angela and explains how he intends to torture and kill her on camera the same way he did Vanessa and all these other women, but she cuts the ropes with a knife, slashes Bosco, grabs his gun, and shoots and kills him. Then Kemma is recovering from his wounds in a hospital. She goes to visit him, and on the television there's a news report about the snuff footage, and they're like, okay, we're going to play it for you now. And that's kind of like what's happening in the background as Kemma and Angela are walking out of the hospital planning to go on a coffee date. And that is the end of Tesis. Scream is one of my all-time favorite movies. I'm an old head, and I saw it when it came out. I was in high school. I was target audience. Matthew Lillard was already one of my favorite actors at the time, and this made me develop a massive crush on Neve Campbell, and just it kind of blew me and almost everybody else away when it came out. Scream really was this cultural shift, and we'll talk more about that, but as somebody who was there at the time and part of the core target demographic, I can concur with the fact that it really hit culture in a way that not very much has before or since. I'd say the next biggest movie that was a cultural shockwave like Scream was The Matrix in 99. Maybe Fight Club to a lesser extent, but only with like dudes.
Sure.
Yeah. And then Thesis, I saw for the first time last year. I had it on my watch list kind of since I joined Letterboxd. I've got my appropriate Letterboxd horror hat on today because I did discover Thesis because of Letterboxd. Nobody I knew had ever told me about it or talked about it, even in horror circles. But I was looking at the top 250 horror movies on Letterboxd and was surprised by how high it was, and decided, to check it out, and was absolutely blown away. It's now in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. Not top 10 horror movies, top 10 movies of all time.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, as we were talking about earlier, just amazed that a student created this, a first film, while I think, as you mentioned, still finishing up school. It was, and I can't recall if I had read that it was a project or a class that the student had failed, but it was almost like a way for him to show up those professors and prove that, it just, looking at it, it feels classic and timeless immediately, and we'll talk about it more once we get to the actual film, in a way that just expresses a mastery that I can't believe it's his first film.
Yeah. There are some filmmakers that their talent is immediately evident and their voice is firmly defined out of the gate, and Alejandro Amenábar is one of them. He's made some incredible films, obviously Thesis, which we're talking about. The Others is one of the best haunted house movies of all time.
Sometimes the world of the dead gets mixed up with the world of the living.
Very near and dear to a lot of people's hearts. And then you have Open Your Eyes, which was remade as Vanilla Sky, and obviously superior to the remake, but even the remake is quite good, and both of them are in my opinion underappreciated and underseen. Anybody who watches them loves them, but you ask anybody hey, have you seen Vanilla Sky? Maybe 20%. You ask them, have you seen the original? No, right? Unfortunately.
And to the point of, it's, if your only exposure is American cinema, and you use the same, I think, metaphor for watching bad films as well. If you're not getting outside of that, you're missing so much good stuff. And a lot of the time, the American cinema is just a worse remake.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and Thesis has been on the remake block for a long time. It's still there. There are people that are actively talking about developing it as either a film remake or into a TV series right now, like in the 2020s, which it doesn't need. It's a shame because American cinema also has a lot to say, and that's kind of why we are looking at these two movies. Like, they are very different in a lot of ways. One's an American film that is very much speaking to an American audience and the American horror landscape. The other is a Spanish language film made in Spain that is looking at things from a more global perspective. But they are, and one is by one of the most experienced and acclaimed horror directors of all time, Wes Craven. The other is a 22 at the time of filming, 23 at the time of release, like essentially film student shooting at the school where he went to film school. In those ways, really, really different, but being made at the same time, released in the same year, and saying a lot of very similar things about horror and film and violence and voyeurism and culture. Really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I think when you're someone like Wes Craven and you can make not one but multiple films deconstructing basically your own filmography, I think that you've reached a new level of not only excellence but sort of like classicness, because that's really what I see Scream as, is a deconstruction in the same way that like Wes Craven's New Nightmare was a deconstruction specifically of the Freddy character. I think that Scream is, and this is not a new idea by any stretch of the imagination, but a deconstruction of the film tropes of like the past 20 years of horror, of the slasher tropes, etc., in a way that was able to take the fact that they were becoming so predictable and almost humorous to a point, and weaponize that into something that's actually effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as you mentioned, like, this isn't Wes Craven's first foray into meta filmmaking. New Nightmare was incredibly meta and ahead of its time and rubbed people the wrong way because of that. Like, it was very much a you might not be ready for this, but your kids are going to love it moment.
In a town where movies go over schedule and directors go over budget, something far more evil is out of control.
I guess you guys aren't ready for that yet. But your kids are gonna love it.
Because he had that experience, he was really able to come into Scream and make a poignant statement while also making an excellent film. And, Kevin Williamson wrote the script. It sold like hotcakes. I try not to regurgitate too much of what you can hear from other podcasts, so I'll keep kind of the making of stuff pretty brief, but interesting that Kevin Williamson wrote the script because he I think saw a documentary on TV about the Night Stalker or one of the other California serial killers, and was staying at a rental house or at a friend's house, and like noticed that the window was open and didn't recall opening the window, and got super freaked out and called his friend, who like started talking to him about horror movies to calm him down. And that's where the idea came from, and he just like had this flash of inspiration, wrote it, and the thing went essentially into a bidding war. It was the hottest script in the market at the time that was being shopped around, and they were super jazzed to make it. Wes Craven was not the first person they went to. In part for in the way that Scream is a deconstruction of horror at the time, and essentially kind of parading around a corpse for jokes. Wes Craven was not the it director. He wasn't hot at the time, They went to Sam Raimi. They went to I'm spacing on who else they did, but it's a really long list of primarily horror directors. And I think they even went to John Carpenter possibly. But everybody turned it down and said the same thing. This is a comedy.
Sure. And
it took Wes Craven and his vision to figure out how to make it a horror film.
Well, and the thing is, like, all horror, or not horror, but like slashers specifically, we're becoming comedy almost to the point where people would laugh at kills and things like still to this day, if I'm watching Friday the 13th or something like that, it's more of a comedic experience because it's so overdone. Like I realize that it's not intended that way, but it's so over the top and so predictable in these sorts of things. Like, not every twist, but when Scream's able to embrace that and, like I said, weaponize that in such an effective way, I think it really is a testament to like finding that shift, that cultural shift, and then being able to like repackage it in the same way that You brought up Cabin in the Woods last time, repackages Evil Dead, and those sorts of things, like finding the way to make it fit the cultural zeitgeist.
Yeah, and you know, in that way, I think that both of these films are very much products of their time and very brilliantly specific to the technology of the era. You couldn't make the first Scream as it is and set it in 2026, and you see a lot of the struggles with that in the later Scream movies, which I still really enjoy. But it's a reason why, in my opinion, horror is best set pre-cell phone.
Sure.
Walter! God damn cellular fucking phones!
Right? Like, if once you introduce cell phones into the mix, especially modern smartphones, a lot of what makes horror good and interesting, like isolation and things like that, just kind of stumble and are a lot harder to work with. And it takes a really adept filmmaker to make a film that is set in modern times that still feels scary, which is part of why I think found footage tends to work better, is because it's using the technology in a way that still feels isolating and immersive. I think that Thesis is a bit more poignant in that its message and its commentary is a bit more timeless, whereas Scream was very poignant and biting commentary for the time that is potentially lost. So, like, I'm curious, what was the first time you saw Scream?
I must have been maybe 12 or 13, probably at a friend's Halloween party. I'm not certain that that's it, but that feels right.
And had you seen or been aware of, like, Scary Movie with the Wayans brothers before seeing Scream?
Probably. That I most likely was, and I did find it interesting that Scream's original name was Scary Movie.
Yeah.
Nice little tie in there.
Yeah, and I feel like, you know, as somebody who saw Scream in theaters opening weekend as a 14-year-old, you know, like, the difference in experience is vast, and I think you can put yourself in the mind frame of culturally what it might have been like if you have an understanding thereof. But, like, at the time, and this has been said on other podcasts and in articles and whatnot, but just speaking as someone who was there, who lived it, yeah, horror was in a lot of ways a joke. Horror was something that was dying as a genre, struggling heavily as a genre. You know, all of the classic villains were driven into the ground or being driven into the ground. You know, we're talking, you know, 6 films for Freddy, 9 for Jason at the time, you know, 3 or 4 for Chucky, I think. God, I don't even know where Halloween was at the time on this. I think maybe 5 or 6 in, and like Hellraiser had 3 or 4 direct-to-video pieces of shit at this point. Right. I mean, like anything.
Hey, those are the good ones.
You know, yeah, they're questionable. But like, it's one of those things where, as a genre, it was struggling. Everything that was considered a tentpole IP was failing. People were having a hard time making something new. Even the greats were really struggling, like John Carpenter's Vampires. I know it has its defenders, but I saw that in theaters, man, and that thing fucking stinks. And I love John Carpenter. He is one of my favorite directors. You know, he has more films in my top 50 than almost any other director. But God, that thing fucking sucks. And it's just, horror in general was trying to find its foothold, right? And a lot of it was getting dumped straight to video. Now, the shot on video DTV market was a whole other story. There was some really cool shit happening in low budget and lo-fi. it didn't look great. Most people wouldn't love it, but like if you're a horror fiend, like you look at Leif Younker's Darkness.
It will rule the earth. No one will be safe. No soul will be spared. There will be no escape. Pray to die before they eat you alive. Leif Younker's Darkness.
This film is not yet rated.
I'll have to figure out something that we can compare that to, but
well, that even compares to Thesis in a way. Like the budget for Thesis was under $1 million. I mean, that's a budget, but still.
Sure, but still, yeah, exactly. And you compare it to Scream, right? Like, which was a big budget Miramax, rollout. And, but I bring all this up because it really frames Scream and helps you understand why it was such a massive cultural explosion, right? I mean, it changed everything. You had parodies in commercials and MTV Movie Awards and even the Oscars of, what's your favorite scary movie, right? Like that was just, it was in the zeitgeist. It was in the culture. It was everywhere because it came out and said, hey, horror sucks now. It's so predictable. It's so sexist. It's so stupid.
Yeah.
But we're going to do it good while telling you that. Right?
Scary night, isn't it? With the murders and all, it's like right out of a horror movie or something.
Randy, you gave yourself away. Are you calling from work? Because Tatum's on her way over.
Do you like scary movies, Sydney?
I like that thing you're doing with your voice, Randy. It's sexy.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Oh, come on, I don't watch that shit.
Why not? Too scared?
No, it's just what's the point? They're all the same. Some stupid killer stalking some big-breasted girl who can't act, who's always running up the stairs when she should be going out the front door. It's insulting.
In both of these films deal with like the commodification of violence and like what are you watching? You can't turn away, understanding things. I think that Scream is probably a little bit more about do movies make you violent? And then the whole like following the rules, everything is pre-scripted. But you also mentioned the technology of the time, not only the cameras being more accessible for independent filmmakers, but you had some thoughts on like the cell phone and how that's changed horror movies. Interestingly, I think the cell phone was obviously it's integral to the plot of Scream, but they use it so effectively as a tool for isolation rather than the tool that emits isolation, or prohibits.
Yeah. Well, and it was a new technology at the time in 1996. Like rich people had them, but that was about it. Like a cell phone bill was, couple $100 a month, at the time, right? Sure. Like you couldn't just buy a burner phone at 7-Eleven like you can now, right? So yeah, I mean, using that fairly new technology to throw further mystery into it. And I think that's one of the things that Scream does really well. So like there are movies that are good parodies, there are movies that are good satire, and then there are movies that are good satire while also being an exceptional film in the genre. Shaun of the Dead being another one. Right.
Sure.
Shaun of the Dead is biting and hilarious commentary with deep references, but it's also one of the best modern zombie movies, regardless of that aspect of it. And Scream is very much the same. The whodunit of Scream is incredibly clever.
Even to the point, you bring up Shaun of the Dead. I consider Funny Games to be a bit of a satire myself, and I think it has a lot in common with these. Came out a year after them. Yeah, the first one did. But sorry, you had a thought there.
Prior to this, slashers especially, but in general, like whether it's slasher or giallo, which is a lot of what Tesis is tapping into, you had a killer. Right. You had one person and you're trying to figure out who it is.
And sometimes it's not the person you thought, or it's typically not the person you thought, but it's not.
Yeah. And whereas Scream had two killers, which blew everybody's fucking mind. Like nobody saw that coming at the time.
Sure.
Like that was fresh. That was new. That was super clever. And it explained all of the what would otherwise be plot holes, right? If somebody's watching it for the first time and they don't know the ending, they might be like, wait, how did the killer get there so fast? How could one person string Drew Barrymore up in the tree? Like, you know, all of these things. But as soon as you know that it's two dudes, one of who is very tall, like now, okay, everything makes sense and everything tracks, everything clocks. And Thesis, technically there's one killer, but it's two people, it's a group involved. Effort. Yeah, it's a group effort. And like I say two people, like part of me, I wanna really rewatch it again, like with a more detective's eye, because like I wonder if Kemma wasn't originally involved and bailed. Like it's certainly not hinted at that much, but like there's enough question there. He certainly was not involved by the time. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's interesting. I do think he knows more than he was letting on, right? Because as we find out partway through the movie, the girlfriend knew something was going on. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I would have to watch with that context. I like to think no. I think that he's more of he's meant to be like the consumer of the snuff films, and the film itself is representative of once he actually experiences the violence, he's able to like rid himself of that need to consume it. Mm-hmm. But
yeah, that makes sense. But either way, there are, you know, you're kind of like going back and forth between Kemma and Bosco and the teacher, and then it turns out it's everybody except Kemma, and like Kemma's still a creep in his own
he's still ways. Like stalking her. I don't know why she ends up going out with him at the end. That made no sense to me.
You know, trauma bond, right? Yeah.
Yeah. She's like, I'm so traumatized that I'm just going to date this guy who stalked me. Like,
oh man. Well, you know, when she was obsessed with the guy that wanted to kill her, the stalker feels just, you know, like a better option, right? But yeah, so they both are very, very smart genre films, you know, whodunits / slashers. That are elevating and giving a spin to the genres that they are playing in to give an unexpected ending. And, you know, I think some people who have consumed a lot of horror and go back and watch Thesis for the first time may feel like the killer is very obvious, but you got to put yourself in the 1996 shoes. Same thing with Scream. You know, I think that that's why I asked you if you had seen Scary Movie before seeing Scream, because I feel like there is a difference in the viewing experience. If you've already seen the parody of something before you've seen it, right? It kind of lessens a lot of the impacts.
Yeah, I can't recall. It's so jumbled in my memory that we can assume. But
yeah, but it's like, you know, it's one of those things where it's like I'm as a dad of a toddler, I'm trying to figure out how to shield my son from the knowledge that Darth Vader is Luke's father before I can get him to watch the Star Wars movies, right? Like there are, you know, and I'm really excited for him to, when he's old enough, watch Terminator and Terminator 2, because Terminator 2 had one of the best plot twist reveals at the first act break of all time that was completely spoiled by the marketing. And now we're far enough out from the marketing that if you can, like, it's also one of those things that it's like so in the culture, like, you know, come with me if you want to live. Like, I feel like you really, like, I've got to get them to him right when he's old enough before he's seen any of the parodies or commentary, you know, or references out there. Because, like, imagine seeing Terminator 2 the way it was intended, James Cameron intended you to view it, where for the first 30 minutes, Arnold is the bad guy, and he is chasing them, and then all of a sudden, like, that scene, that hallway scene is so fucking good if you don't know that twist. Like, it is.
He pulls the shotgun out of the rose. This is the same reason that I do my best not to watch trailers anymore. And if I watch a trailer, I'll watch the first 10 seconds. Same. You know, just because these marketing, I'm just going to say hacks, and I used to work in marketing, so I can say that.
I do work in marketing.
I know you work in marketing. I'm not calling you a hack. These guys, like, I don't understand what he, like, you just spoiled the whole movie. Do people actually want that? Are people so thoughtless? I don't understand.
Yeah, it really shocks me. There are some production companies and studios out there that have a habit of putting the final shot of a movie in the trailer. Not just a scene from the end, the final shot of a movie in the trailer. And what made me stop watching trailers was, the trailer for Amazing Spider-Man 2. I saw it. I was like, yeah, that's really cool. And my now wife and I went to see it on a date when we were dating in theaters. And I'm just waiting for that epic shot from the trailer of Spider-Man jumping at the metallic rhino. I was like, I want to see, like, I'm skeptical of doing the rhino as a mech suit, but that's interesting. And that fight looks like it's going to be badass. And I'm just like waiting. And I look down at my watch and I'm like, that's going to be the last shot of the movie, isn't it? And it was. Yeah. And so from there, before we hit the third act turn, I was able to figure out the rest of the movie because that's the way my brain works. And I just, I was super disappointed. Whereas, my wife, she can watch a trailer and then 2 days later have forgotten what was in it and be surprised by what happens in the movie. And I respect that. my brain does not work that way. Sure. So I just stopped watching trailers. I don't even read synopses.
I mean, I think it's enviable to a point. My mom can watch the same 3 shows over and over. But anyway, I think we're digressing.
Yeah. But I say that in part because my viewing of Thesis was really interesting. Because again, I don't read synopses, let alone watch trailers. I go in as blind as possible. So you get to the part where she finds the Figueroa, the older professor, dead after watching it. And I was like, oh shit, it's going to be like a VHS that kills anybody that watches it. That's so cool. And
that was my first thought as well. Yeah.
And this came out before Ringu. So I'm curious if they saw, like the filmmaker for Ringu saw this and was like, oh, that's a cool idea.
Oh, I have a lot of thoughts on that whenever we dive, like specifically on Thesis, but I'm going to hold it for right now.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, and so, I was very enwrapped, didn't know what the road was going to be or where it was going to take me throughout Thesis. And so as it dove into the, the snuff storyline and all that, it was really fascinating and kept me engrossed the entire time. And, it's one of those snuff films as a topic are really interesting because there's a lot of movies about them and there's not a lot of evidence that they actually exist, but they were very much in the cultural window of the era because you had Charlie Sheen calling the FBI because he got... So, it's interesting that Charlie Sheen came out with this story, or maybe other people found out about it because of the FBI report. But my question is, who are your friends and what kind of movies were they getting for you, Charlie Sheen, that you thought they gave you an actual snuff film? But it wasn't. It was Guinea Pig, Flower of Flesh, something like that. One of the Guinea Pig films that was, dubbed and dubbed and dubbed to the point that it looked... And I mean, the effects in that movie are incredible anyway. But then you have it a multi-dubbed VHS and suddenly you think you're watching an actual snuff film, so he called the FBI. And then there was a serial killer in Japan who was obsessed with the guinea pig films and recreating them. So it was, whether or not there were any actual snuff films ever in existence, it was something that everybody was aware of and people were making movies about them. You got 8mm and 8mm 2.
Snuff 2, The Resurrection.
And a bunch of other movies. There were 4 or 5 movies prior to Thesis that dealt with it as well.
Well, and it's interesting too because I think that is the primary distinction between Scream and Thesis. Is Scream is very much about direct nods to horror films, simulating violence, and Thesis is very much at the core of actuality of violence, almost like documentary style. And I think that Thesis was made in an environment. I believe Spain had only been a democracy for like 20 years. There was a huge amount of cultural upheaval and change. There was probably a lot of kind of conservative thinking that they were breaking through, and concern, like satanic panic type concerns. And I think Thesis is directly addressing that in a way that's much more of like a traditional classic film. And Scream is like completely just subverting that and doing its own thing and like laughing at the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, they both play with expectations in really clever and interesting ways because they're so aware of the environments in which they are setting themselves and debuting, right? So with Thesis, you know, you have Amenábar making all those commentaries that you already mentioned, but then also deciding not to show the actual snuff violence on screen, which is, in my opinion, part of what makes it a masterful film. It would have been really easy to just try and shock the audience, but allowing them to use their imaginations is going to be significantly more shocking than anything you could put on screen, especially in 1996. And it allowed him to make a more visceral commentary because he was not being exploitative of the viewer or the characters or the actors that were in his film.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing I had noticed is typically it's almost like the first person view of from like Halloween or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Typically the monster is not on screen or the violence is not on screen in Thesis. And there's this really interesting sequence. They play with mirrors a little bit, but at the very end, where when what's his name, Bosco, is you know still in the predatory status, and he's off screen, but you see him in a mirror, and then a little bit later they directly inverse it, where Bosco's on screen, and Angela, however you say her name,
yeah.
Is like in the same position and seen as more the predator, and that's it, once she realizes like who he is. Now, obviously, she doesn't do a lot of good with that information, but you know, once the roles are reversed to a point.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's you know, a really interesting approach to things that is very much manipulating the visual language of the genre of horror in the same way that Scream manipulated the narrative language of horror at the time. You know, you've got obviously the two killers being a big surprise, but there's a lot of, I mean, there's not much in Scream that isn't a subversion in some way or the other, and it's very much true of Thesis as well. But like, so Drew Barrymore gets killed in the opening scene. Something you may or may not remember, something that younger folks who are listening to us may or may not know unless they've listened to other commentaries on the movie Scream. That was a massive surprise. Drew Barrymore was nicknamed, like her nickname was America's Sweetheart at the time in 1996. She was like one of the it women of cinema, and you know, leading in romantic comedies, and just like, I mean, she was Dynasty. She was Hollywood Dynasty, right? Like her parents, huge names, you know, in Hollywood, and she had been in front of the camera since E.T. and was just, you know, this girl/woman who America was really fond of and Hollywood was very protective of in a lot of ways. And she was billed as a star. So everybody went into that movie expecting her to be the final girl, which was not even a term. Well, actually, I'm trying to think of when that book came out.
But I'm sure there's still the context of she's the lead actress. This whatever.
Yes,
it is.
the one who survives, right? Like that was just, everybody believed that, and she was originally cast as Sydney.
Yeah,
she is the one that chose, as an homage to Psycho, to be the one that was killed in the opener, as opposed to the leading woman, right? She chose to be Casey because she wanted to homage, you know, one of the OGs and Psycho. And she's like, Wes, like, how much would it blow people's minds if you murder me in the first 10 minutes.
That way it's kind of like that psychedelic, trip thing.
Always play with their minds.
Sure. Well, and I believe the actress, the lead actress was not unknown, but much smaller, right?
Yeah. So this was also, that's another thing that looking back on it, if you just sit down and watch it now, you're going to see a lot of really huge names and be like, oh, these are all big people. Nah, man, these were all TV stars. Like, these were not Hollywood stars. That was part of how they kept their budget tight, right? Because it was a big script, but it was still a Miramax film. Like, we're not talking AAA. It was still a horror movie, so they had to manage their budget, and part of the way they did that was by hiring television actors. And the Kevin Williamson was a TV writer. He wrote Dawson's Creek. That's also part of why Scream is as good as it is, and why Kevin Williamson was like the hot shit screenwriter for a while, is he had built a career on writing believable and endearing teenage characters.
Sure.
And now he's making a movie using those same writing techniques and those same characters, or those same character methodologies, and killing them on screen, or having them
now just killing them.
Yeah.
Talk about believable and endearing. Stu is one of the best characters in any movie of all time.
100%, man. Like, Matthew Lillard is he will forever be one of my favorite actors. He's done some of my favorite roles, especially like in my formative years. Like, I already talked about Hackers and how big that was, and I thought that Serial Killer was just so fucking cool. And then you've got Stu Macher, who is just hilarious and endearing in this, and then SLC Punk, I mean, there's just like, he just one movie after another, I was just like, this guy plays these characters that just like speak to me in ways that are really something else. And yeah, apparently
it's funny because I know him from Scooby-Doo first, I think. Because I'm a little bit younger.
There you go. And Shaggy, another formative character.
He was the best character in the film. So
yeah, and Stu was according to Kevin Williamson, the most underwritten character. Almost everything we see on screen was brought by Matthew Lillard, and a lot of his lines were ad-lib.
Sure.
And like, that just speaks to his talent, right? And I think one of the things that he and Skeet brought to it that was probably not on the page was the gay undertones of their relationship, and the homoeroticism, and like the idolization of Billy by Stu, which we can get into a little more later. But in rewatching, and like, because I have seen Scream over 20 times probably, but like really sitting down and like looking at nuances, it's a very meticulously crafted film. And there's some really interesting things with the relationship between Stu and Billy that, in my opinion, have some telegraphing information about the killer that I think like makes it an even more interesting watch. But we can, dive into that a little later. I think we're still, kind of more talking top level.
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to transition if you are, but yeah, at its core, we're talking about two films that are about how kind of like the gaze of the viewer upon violence, and how that affects people, and how it's represented in media, and similarly, maybe more so in Thesis, but how the gaze of the camera or the lens back is like where that conversation lies, and where all the meaning is derived from.
Yeah, and they both do such an interesting job of that, right? The lens itself is like this visual form of commentary that has some just incredibly interesting things to say that are never like exposited on, which speaks to why they're both so endearing for people, right? Like, obviously, we're talking about, snuff videos in Thesis, but like, there's where she wakes up, well, she thinks she wakes up, she's having the dream, and there's the camera in the corner, and Bosco is there to make out with her while cutting her, right? Like, and there's the the stalking element and just all of the interview scene. There's like everything is just through the lens. Everything is the separation of the person, the filmmaker from the subject, through the lens, or being prey by being on the other side of the lens, right? Just really interesting and like examining the vulnerability of being in front of a lens.
Well, even what was his name? Kima,
yeah.
Figuring out the camera from the digital zoom. Now we know that he has more context, but then being like, oh, the digital zoom, they ruined the lens shot, sort of thing. Bosco is constantly asking, what color are my eyes? He talks about eyes a lot. In viewing.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up that thing of figuring out, it had to be one of these cameras because digital zoom is a new technology. That's just one of the many things about both of these that the reason they work is because they're set in 1996. And it's like you couldn't redo, you could redo Thesis in modern day, but it's not going to be the same. And a lot of what made the unraveling of the mystery so clever is going to be lost. And similarly in Scream, the newness of cell phones as a technology is lost in modern, times, which is part of why the sequels to Scream, no matter how good they are, will always feel different. Which the latest one, like 3 is the one I like the least, and even that is a pretty entertaining movie, right? I really like a lot of them, including the most recent ones, but they have a very different feel because they're set in modern day, and it's a very, like, you're commenting on yourself thrice removed. Anyway, I won't get down that rabbit hole, but point being, they use lenses in really interesting ways to tell stories, right? Like the hidden camera in the party on top of the TV that has a 7-second or a 30-second delay back to the news van, right? And you've got Jamie Kennedy in his best role ever, sitting on the couch, yelling at Jamie in Halloween.
In Halloween, yeah.
He's behind you while the killer is behind him while he's being filmed. Like, it's this, like, he's yelling at the subject of a lens while being the subject of a lens in the same scenario. And like, it's just, there's,
Well, I think there's even one extra step there, which I very much enjoyed. The delay created a situation in which the guy in the truck is yelling as it's happening to him. He's watching it happen to someone else as it's happening to him. So it's like 4 levels removed.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. It's just, like, stuff like that is incredibly smart and a very meta commentary without sitting down and saying, being the subject of a lens and commenting on, like, they don't need to use words to say what they're saying. And it despite that being shortly after one of the most famous monologues in horror, which is the rules.
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie. For instance, number 1, you can never have sex. No. Big no-no.
I'm a dead man.
Sex equals death, okay? Number 2, you can never drink or do drugs. No, the sin factor. It's a sin. It's an extension of number 1. And number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
I'm getting another beer. You want one?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be right back.
There are rules.
I just keep coming back to that Downey Jr. quote. I'm a dude playing a dude. It's like it's a dude watching a dude being watched by another dude being watched by there's so many layers, and it's just circular.
Yeah, it's so smart. And I know I have nostalgia glasses to it for a bit. I know that people who see it for the first time in a modern lens, especially those who didn't live in the 90s, aren't really going to like get it, but like there's a lot of stuff that is just so indicative of the time, like chatting 911 because you can't get to your house phone because you don't have a cell phone. Right. Yeah, and then on a filmmaking side with Scream, something that I think is really interesting is the phone voice was cast. It was a person. doing that voice. His name is Roger Jackson.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
So it's not VO, it's not dubbed in. They had him in a separate room on set, closed off from talent with a mic on an actual cell phone, making an actual call. All the phones were live. So like in that opening scene, he's calling Drew Barrymore as Casey, and she's picking up and he's talking to her, and she doesn't know exactly what he's going to say. She's got a sense of it because of like the script, but like the dialogue for him was more generic. And so a lot of the reactions are more genuine because of that. And it's a live actual conversation. They're not just pretending they're listening to something. They're hearing.
Well, right. You can play to it so much easier. And then the guy on the other end of the phone can get context clues and through the audio that he's hearing and things like that. I think that's pretty genius.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And like, I mean, it sets up the phone as a terror device in such an interesting way. And there are some people whose, I don't know that it's a criticism, but they'll say that the opening sequence of Scream is the best part of the movie. And I can see justification for that. I disagree because Stu Macher's not in it, but and Nev Campbell's not in it, but it is really masterful. And the line, "I want to know who I'm looking at."
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.
Is one of the most chilling lines in horror. Like, it's so smart. The way everything just turns on a dime, right? Up to that point, she was kind of losing herself. Like, you could tell that she was still cautious because she locks one of the doors as she walks by it. But she's like getting a little charmed by him. She's having fun flirting with this random voice that's kind of sexy. And then there's that line. And then it's like, oh, I'm in trouble.
Yeah. Well, and immediately back to the vision, to the voyeurism, whatever it is. And then obviously that sets up like a microcosm of what you're supposed to expect for the rest of the movie, which is what they deconstruct for the rest of the film, right? But it immediately tells you what you're dealing with, and then rips that all down and says, nope, you were wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And, you've got the meta satire in there with the phone call of, what's your favorite scary movie? Freddy. Yeah, those movies are scary. Yeah, the first one, the rest of them sucked, which Wes Craven wanted to take out because he felt it would make him sound like an egomaniac. He did not write that line. But Drew Barrymore was like, dude, you directed 6, so you're still saying your movies suck. And he's like, oh, okay, all right, I'll keep it in. Like,
yeah.
The viscerality in that scene really sets the stage. I have a fan-made unedited director's cut, and it's only 10 seconds longer, but those seconds are all violence. Like, when Steve gets gutted, you actually see the intestines fall out. You get a longer hold on Casey hanging before the push-in shot, and the push-in shot is slowed back down. So that like chaotic jumpy push in to Casey hanging from the tree that informed so much of editing and shooting of horror after that. Like, I mean, like that in and of itself, along with the soundtrack, birthed this whole style of like teen horror. That was not intentional. It was a standard push-in, and the MPAA was like, you need to shorten that, and so they had to go in and remove every other frame.
Well, I had read they submitted it like 8 times or something. They almost got an NC-17 rating, which to me is wild. I don't know how bad those 10 seconds are, but that is... Rating systems have certainly changed since 1996 is what I'll say.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's certainly more gore, but it's nothing that is like so shocking. But I think, MPAA was more defensive back then. It's also dealing with high schoolers as the victims, which are children, right? So there's that. But yeah, like the scene where Ghostface grabs her from behind and very methodically looks to make sure that he's going to stab her in the heart, and then stabs her in the heart. they wanted that cut differently, or they wanted it shot differently or something like that. And he's like, no, that's the only shot that we got. I can't sub it out. And so he pushed back on it and was able to keep it.
Sure.
But he intentionally shot additional footage of Drew's body, the additional like guts falling out of Steve, and a few of the other kills he shot longer, knowing that the MPAA would push him to cut. So he did more than he wanted in the movie to give him room to cut down to essentially what he wanted, thereby kind of scamming the MPAA with their violence. It's just, that's one of those interesting coin flips. Like, that's why part of why Scream is like this other side of the coin to Thesis, whereas Thesis is intentionally withholding the violence and the gore and leaving it up to the imagination. Wes is pushing the envelope and pushing back on the MPA and doing everything he can to just eke under an NC-17 rating.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because Thesis feels like a more violent movie, but it's mostly because of implication.
Because of the implication.
You do see a couple of scenes of, I would say, pretty extreme brutality, but not gory brutality. And the gore is typically implied partially for budgetary reasons, but it also just works extremely well. You know, the same thing, constantly talking about like lenses and eyes, framing, and how all these things are being framed. That even goes in the context of both Scream more so, but both of them deal with the news and how the news frames things. The news in Thesis just plays one of the snuff films on like national television, and everyone's watching it, and then those two are finally free of it and they can walk away. Good for them. And then Gail Weathers in Scream, on the way that she has framed things to be successful, and she's selling violence to people, and this and that's kind of you know, a mirroring of like slasher films and selling violence on the news. But then she's also shows herself to be actually legitimately trying to get to the truth of the matter, making sure like an innocent man isn't executed, etc. But she certainly spins a story in a way to, you know, book sales and such.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, she's certainly, you know, out to get hers. But a lot of the perceived enmity between her and Sydney is because she's pushing for a truth that Sydney doesn't want to know. Right. Which is certainly interesting. Whereas you have in Thesis, right, you've got Angela pushing for a truth that she ultimately doesn't want to know, but thinks she does. And we see that from the opening sequence where she's trying to see the body on the tracks. Like she's trying to frame it as an academic curiosity, but she has a morbid pulling to violence the same way that she's criticizing society for.
Yeah. And I hadn't thought about that, but it's the same microcosm that Scream does. It does the whole movie in the first couple of minutes. Or how you know, and then spends the rest of the movie deconstructing that, what it set up.
Yeah, exactly. For being, in a lot of ways, very different movies, they feel very much like two sides of the same coin, and very much birds of a feather. Like, they're very in step in a lot of ways. From that, you know, framing in the opening and the, you know, kind of the final commentary at the end, and the deconstruction throughout, to the meta and the lenses. Like, there's so much that they were very clearly tapping into the same vein, from totally different parts of the world, completely unaware of each other. Just so fascinating.
Well, in both of them, the center part is like set in a school and at like dinner parties, and they both end at like a farmhouse out of the city, as well. So two more, obviously one is somebody doing a graduate level thesis, and the other one's high school, but there are similarities there that are just, there were probably trends that were kind of informing this thinking, but just even more similarities.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, a lot of interesting commentary, both overtly and subversively about relationships and monogamy or lack thereof, and manipulation through relationships, right? In both of them, you have the killer manipulating the female lead into romance to essentially deflect themselves and to kind of lure them into their trap. But then you have, Thesis is a bit more normal in its commentaries. It's mostly about cishet relationships, whereas in Scream, the surface is kind of what we're talking about, and the manipulation, both of these guys are using part of, like, initially, oh, why would they kill Casey and Steve? What's that about? Well, because Casey and Steve burned Stu, and Stu wanted them dead, right? Like, Stu was angry at them. But man, go back and rewatch Scream through the lens of Stu being in love with Billy, and Billy being a psychopath who's incapable of loving anyone, but uses people's love for him to manipulate them, to put them in the positions he wants and to get them to do what he wants. Right.
I mean, yes, I have a thought I want to circle back to, but before, like, when they're just, first of all, it's hilarious. They're just stabbing each other at the end.
Yeah.
But you had mentioned the kind of homoerotic undertones before, and it's vaguely sexual in a way. They're just sitting there stabbing each other. It's like the only way that Billy knows how to express himself is through, like, murder.
Yeah.
And so Stu is, like, happy to be stabbed by him, and it keeps letting him do it. And he's like, "You stabbed me too many times, man."
I feel a little woozy here.
Stop it, Billy, would you, all right? I can't take anymore. I'm feeling a little woozy here.
Yeah.
Absolutely hilarious. But going back to, like, basically the killers need to, like, sexually conquest these women before they can kill them.
Right.
And then the incels are the good guys.
Yeah.
In both movies.
In both movies,
But the three rules, right? Like, don't have sex, don't drink or do drugs, and don't say, "I'll be right back." I just realized that at the very end of Thesis, she has sex, she drinks an alcoholic drink, and then says, "I'll be right back."
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. Like, she does, and not exactly "I'll be right back," but in effect. And that's when things go downhill for her. I mean, they'd already encountered, like, resistance before, but that's, like, when the predator gets her. And that's really crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I can point those scenes specifically because I just watched it this morning. But
nice. It's fascinating how much they wind up saying very similar things in different ways. And like, but going back to your point about the stabbing being vaguely sexual, so there's a really great deconstruction of the slasher. I'm a bad feminist in that I don't remember the author's name, but she wrote a really excellent book. It's the book that coined the term final girl, but it also breaks down the slasher genre as an exploration of, essentially misogyny on film, and the knife or the weapon is essentially a phallic representation that is always penetrating, and the blood splatter is the money shot. Like, it's a very sexual genre through that, like, essentially exploring sex through violence. And it's based on, you look at Randy's rules, modern morality tales, right? You don't do the moral thing, you get violently, fucked to death by a knife, right? Like,
right.
To be as crass about it, but that's essentially what the movies are saying back in the day, and so Scream was turning that on its head and making that commentary of that was already kind of out there, and other people were making similar commentaries. That also lends to, again, the relationship between Billy and Stu. If the knife is a representation of the penis and stabbing is penetration, and they're stabbing each other, right? Like, it's, but there are moments like where they're talking to Sydney in that final scene, and Stu comes up behind Billy and gives the most, like, longing look.
Yeah.
Like, and you know, Matt Lillard and Skeet Ulrich have come out and said, yeah, that's how we played it. Like, as far as we're concerned, we're the first gay couple of horror. And I think that that's really fascinating. And I mentioned to you, I was like, if you watch it again, try and pinpoint who does the killing.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well. And I think your point is, not to steal your thunder, but that Stu may not have actually killed anyone.
Yeah.
Which is further supported by the fact that Gale Weathers and the cop don't die.
Right.
Because I believe that was Stu chasing them.
Yeah, and whenever Ghostface has a pratfall, it's usually Stu.
Right. I also love how he's just running, like tripping over couches and stuff like that. It's like kind of funny, but actually makes it act scarier in a way.
Yeah. You know, it's the viscerality of like, this is just a crazy person. You know, there's no supernatural elements, but it felt supernatural because there were two of them and people didn't realize it. But yeah, there's I was paying really close attention to the shoes this time, because that's like the thing that you see of the killer for the most part is the boots, right? And Billy wears black boots, Stu wears black sneakers. So like anytime you see the boots, that's Billy. And then it was also a dead giveaway in the opening scene where we see the whole friends group for the first time. Billy's got on his black boots, Stu has on his black shoes, and Randy has on these neon green shoes.
Sure.
It's like, he is not the killer.
Right. Well, and then Randy's supposed to be the fall guy. Is like, he watches all the horror movies. He works at he's the one that, again, to relate to Satanic Panic, I know it was a little bit afterward. Actually, this would have been probably around like the Columbine Panic, right? A couple years after.
It was before. We can talk about that a little bit. It was before, but there were still concerns, but it was post the West Memphis 3, for example. So the Satanic Panic was still there.
But like Doom was 93, Doom 2 I think was 95, and those were even before Columbine. Obviously, like lumped into like over depiction of violence in video games and that sort of thing. I think Randy even calls it out in the film. He's like, if this was a classic slasher movie, I'm the guy you would expect. But then I would end up not being it because you shouldn't. I'm a red herring. And then that's kind of what it is.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, I know for certain, obviously partially because like I was a freshman in high school in 96 and Columbine happened later. But they had to change Scream 3. Yeah, they had to completely rewrite Scream 3. It was originally supposed to take place somewhere else, and one of the sub storylines was that Stu was still alive and had been like building a cult of high school students who were committing a bunch of murders in the name of Ghostface. Obviously, they couldn't do that.
I would like to see that movie, but
yeah, I mean, it sounded awesome, right? Yeah. But then, speaking to like how much of a cultural titan the Scream franchise was, the first movie that ever had to rewrite its ending because the script got leaked online was Scream 2.
Sure. I'd also heard that they didn't want probably on the internet, but leaks for the first one, so they like filmed extra scenes or had some fake scripts and things like that.
They filmed multiple endings, I think, for all of them. Definitely for 2 and 3. In part because of that. But yeah, the initial ending for Scream 2 was totally different, and somebody found it and stole it and leaked it online, and it's the first ever instance of a script being leaked online and causing them to change production as a result. So because everybody wanted to know who was going to be the killer in Scream 2 before it even came out, because that's how big this movie was. And you know, I kind of said to you when we were talking about doing this episode, I think that if Thesis had been English language, not subtitled, and gotten an international release, it would be as big as Scream, if not more so. And I think the only thing that might have held that back is, to your point, the fact that it feels more visceral and violent, despite showing less. And I think it's because the subject matter is so grimy and grungy. And you also have, the settings. Every setting in Scream is fucking gorgeous, right? The houses are incredible, multi-million-dollar houses in wine country. The suburb is a perfect idyllic suburb, which is the point, right? It's the contrast of the violence to the setting, whereas like Kema's apartment is the dirtiest fucking place.
It looks like a psychopath's apartment. Like, he's not doing himself any favors.
Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious.
None at all, right? And then they're like down in the tunnels under the school, and like it's a grimy movie. And when you were talking about the fact that it feels so much more violent than Scream, it reminded me of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, one of the original slashers, which is often remembered by people as one of the most violent or gory movies that they've ever seen. And it's another one where almost everything happens off screen. Very little actual violence in the film whatsoever. Like, it's actually visually very tame, but the idea and the sound and like the terror that Tobe Hooper is able to invoke makes everyone remember it as this horrifyingly gory film. So,
well, I mean, if you look at Texas Chainsaw and Thesis, both of them, relatively low budget films, they're using a lot of natural lighting. A lot of the key lighting in Thesis is like they'll have a TV on at a certain angle, and that's giving the key lighting. Yeah, probably because they didn't have a lot like an actual gaffer. And I think that that's part of what makes it look so classic. It looks more like a Hitchcock film than it does like a Hollywood slasher film. I think it's shot more like a Hitchcock film as well. It's very, it's like a labyrinth. I feel very much so when you're going through the tunnels, and they do a lot of really interesting things like with lighting as far as like the matches when they're walking down the tunnel with the matches. I think it just uses lighting to capture a much darker, grittier atmosphere, where Scream is like all super well lit. There's like no dark corners to hide in because they don't need to, because they're just like hiding socially.
Yeah, exactly. There are so many techniques and decisions in Thesis that are so smart and have been vamped so many times, right? Like in different ways. The match scene is brilliant. We've already talked about it, but not showing the violence, and like when she turns the contrast all the way down so she can listen without seeing it because she's too afraid to look. Like, I mean, like they're so smart and so like edgy and visionary, and you can see things like that still being borrowed today.
Sure.
It's just it's so smart. And he only did one other horror movie, which is crazy. He's had a great career. Who am I to criticize? But I wish we got more horror from him,
Well, only two types of people can make movies about what you do. So he was a film student. He made a movie about a film student. That makes sense. You're very young in your career. Or you're like at the end of your career, like Wes Craven. You're like, now I can make movies about what I've done. If you're somewhere in the middle, no one cares.
Yeah. Right.
So maybe he felt like he got that out of his system.
But you mentioned, I kind of brought up Ringu, and you said you had some thoughts about Ringu and...
not Ringu
or just
specifically.
VHS, yeah.
So Thesis has it's not like it's a unique trend, but like the duo killer in the basement sort of thing. And there were two other specific pieces of media that I am a huge fan of that I almost refuse to believe have not seen that film. The first one would be Stieg Larsson's Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, where Martin Wonger and his father, I forget his name, basically do the same thing that they're doing in Thesis.
Right.
He just keeps the videos for himself, but he's not like distributing them. But they're doing the exact same thing that they're doing in Thesis in a very similar setting. And then the other one is a video game, Life is Strange, which there is almost no way. I would love to speak to the writers on that. There's almost no way, because there are so many parallels. And I don't know if you've played it, but I don't want to spoil too much. But if you liked Thesis, you would like well, I can't speak for you, but I believe you would like Life is Strange.
Yeah, it's been at the top of my game queue for a while. I just have not sat down to play it. You know, it's one of those where like.
Well, mild spoiler, so apologies.
No, it's fine. It's totally fine. I will do my best to forget. But yeah, like, you know, I not to get too much on a gaming tangent, but like I sadly like play mostly casual pick up put down games because I have a 3-year-old, and even before that, like once I got into this career, it's pretty busy, and like the last game I played through was Cyberpunk 2077 when it came out because I took 2 weeks off of work.
Wake the fuck up, samurai. We have a city to burn.
Like I literally blocked out vacation for it. So.
If it helps, I think Life is Strange is like a 20-hour game, so significantly shorter.
Yeah.
But yeah, and also apologies if you haven't read or seen Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, but the parallels are uncanny.
Nice. Yeah. It's, you know, I mean, it's got to be a widely influential film, and unfortunately, not a lot of people have seen it. Like, I think, you know, I could ask anybody else that I talk to on a regular basis, hey, have you seen Thesis? Including like the people in my industry, and most of them will say no, which is a shame. Like, it is.
Well, and neither of those are American media either.
Right.
Life is Strange is Canadian, and Stieg Larsson was Swedish.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So. And, you know, I mean, so remade as a film with Daniel Craig. So some people, you know, will know Girl with the Dragon Tattoo at least, but.
The Swedish films were better, but.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. But yeah, man, it's, you know, 2 hugely influential movies. One of them wildly popular, the other sadly underappreciated and underseen, but saying really fascinating things, essentially the same things at the same time. And one went on to spawn a ton of sequels, and the other launched a really successful career. I mean, the guy won a ton of awards for Thesis too, like as a 23-year-old in, you know, the Spanish film scene. No, not in America, because in 96 they really did not give a shit about foreign films, unfortunately. Sure. But yeah, I could talk about Scream, you know, kind of for forever. But yeah, I think, you know, I don't want to like dive into the sequels and things like that because we're just talking about the OG. But
this is the part where you're going to get mad that I don't know if I've seen any of the sequels except for, I think, number 6. Was that the one with Jenna Ortega?
She was in 5 and 6, yeah. So.
Okay, I saw one of the ones with Jenna Ortega in it.
Yeah.
So I know you're going to hate me for that, but maybe I'll have to dive in.
No, I definitely recommend it. I will. Okay, so I'll get on just a little bit of a kick about them. So like 3 is the bottom of the valley of the series, in mine and most people's opinions. It's still entertaining, but as mentioned, it suffers from having to be rewritten shortly before going into production. But it really like elevates the meta commentary, eventually maybe to a satirical degree, but in my opinion, in very, very smart ways. There's the Stab franchise starting in the second film, which are the movies based on the books from Gale Weathers and the actual accounts of what happened in Woodsboro. So you've got that initial meta commentary of like they're making movies about the things that happened to us, right? Right. And there's in the third, I think it's the third, maybe it's in one of them. I'll have to, you know, they blur a little bit in my mind, unfortunately. But Sydney gets chased onto the sound stage in which they have a recreation of her house. And so she's being chased through her house by Ghostface, but it's a sound stage and a movie set, and like it's just so smart. Like and then 4, most people hate 4. I really liked 4. The opening of 4 is possibly my favorite, and I'm not going to spoil why, but it's just it just cracked me up. But yeah, I think I wouldn't say 2 is my favorite opening, but seeing it in theaters, and when you see it, you'll see why. Like, it was super memorable. Just like out of the gate, it's like, you thought the first one was meta, like, strap the fuck in.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to it. I'm definitely in that mode of thought right now, so maybe I'll watch it tonight.
Nice.
But yeah, these films were a fun watch. I think that I've prattled on about my thoughts long enough on them. Hopefully everyone found them interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure, well, hopefully, yeah, I was saying, I'm sure they did. Well, hopefully, yes. Hopefully you all found our thoughts interesting. I hope that you took the time to stop and go watch these before coming and listening, so you didn't get everything spoiled. And I hope you enjoyed the watch, man, because they're two really pinnacle horror films from the 90s that, in my opinion, still hold up and offer great entertainment. So
yeah. Well, as usual, this has been the Drive-In Dive-In, and I don't know if we've selected our next set of films yet, but we have a ever-growing list of things that I'm really excited to get to. I think maybe we might get out of the horror franchise for a little bit, kind of take a lighter tone, but...
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've got Naked Gun on the list, and we've got some other, classic stuff in there. So we'll do definitely something lighthearted after this, and keep cruising. So yeah, thanks for listening.
See you.